Merrill Memo with Matthew Dickerson from Dubbo Regional Council.
It was the monthly Dubbo Regional Council meeting last night, and as we heard before the 7 o'clock news, there was a strong showing from members of the Dubbo Stock and Sale Yards Association. There is more meetings and briefings to come before a decision is made on that potential privatisation of the Dubbo regional livestock markets. But there were other items on the agenda at last night's meeting. To tell us more, Mayor of Dubbo Regional Council, Matthew Dickerson, good morning.
It was a busy meeting, so good to see.
A lot of people squashed into that room.
Well, I used to enjoy the old days. Before we had live streaming, we used to have lots of people regularly attend council meetings, and it felt like it was nice to have an audience there.
Yeah.
And of course, with live streaming now, sometimes we might have a meeting with 2 or 3 people there, but hundreds online, but it's not quite the same.
It's not.
Live theatre, you
Yeah.
want people in the audience for live theatre.
Yeah, kind of. And there were some very passionate people speaking at Open Day last night.
Yeah, that's right. And it's actually almost a bit like there was a process many years ago called Save Our South, and we had to actually hold the council meeting over in the theatre to accommodate the large number of people that we had coming along to that. It may be in the very near future when we get to the stage of making a decision, because obviously, as you mentioned, there's no decision about the sale yards. In fact, it wasn't even on the agenda last night, but when we finally get to the stage of making a decision about that, we might need to hold that at the theatre to accommodate the hopefully hundreds of people that come along who care about what's happening there.
Yeah, and a fairly common theme amongst everybody who was speaking is that they are opposed to the privatisation.
I think you'd be a fairly brave person to have that crowd behind you and then stand up and say, I really like the idea of selling the sale yards, because I think there'd be, and I do warn the crowd, and the crowd is very well behaved, that the process is that you're not meant to cheer or jeer or basically intimidate people that are speaking or intimidate councillors. And the crowd was very well behaved, so that was fantastic. Well done to the crowd there. But I still think it'd be a brave person who stood up there and said, maybe we should just sell these, maybe for whatever reason. I believe that. So, so no, everyone said the same thing in different variations. And some of it's a little bit confused, because some people are talking about don't sell their sale yards because they inject money into the economy, and there's no question they do. We estimate maybe $80 million they inject into the economy, but no one's arguing that they should be shut down if they're leased out or they're sold. And again, I stress no decision has been made, but if they're leased out or sold, any company that leases them or buys them will continue to run those. They're not going to invest a significant amount of money and then shut it down. They're going to try and run that as well as possible. And I suppose one person made the example last night about the abattoirs. The old days, many councils owned abattoirs around the state, and now most councils don't, including Dubbo doesn't own an abattoirs, but we've now got an abattoirs owned by a private company that's expanded way beyond anything that a council would have been able to do, exporting with our current abattoirs here, the hundreds of people that are employed and the exporting across the world. I just don't think a council would have run it to that level. So that's the possibility with a privately run sale yards, is that you've got that ability potentially to expand and grow. It might inject more money into the Dubbo economy. But I'm getting ahead of myself because no decision's been made.
Well, but as it was pointed out as well, though, there's the potential for a lot of money, for council to make a lot of money with the growth of sale yards and things. So the council making money from the sale yards if they continued to own it?
Well, the problem with council running a business is councils inherently are not good at running businesses for a whole range of reasons. You can't be flexible and agile running a business when every decision you make, you've got to bring back to a council meeting for a group of councillors in an open public forum, transparently, to make decisions about that. So with a number of our businesses, they're not run as profitably as a private operator will run them for a whole range of different reasons. So I think it's always going to be difficult for councils to run businesses as well as a private operator. The other thing is that councils typically are risk averse. The public doesn't like the council losing money, making mistakes, so you tend to be risk averse. Now in business, sometimes you do take risks because you're making decisions that sometimes have some risk associated with them, and it's your business, so you're okay with those risks. You're not exposed to the glare of the public every decision that you make. So it is a difficult process with any of our businesses we run to run them as efficiently as a private operator.
Now, the concept of an indoor aquatic centre was discussed last night. It's certainly something that a lot of people are really keen to see, but it's been through a lot of different processes. A lot of ideas and concepts have gone through. Where do we stand with that idea?
Well, if I was being a little bit naughty, I'd say, well, if we sold the sale yards, then the money we had from that we could put into an aquatic leisure centre. But we're not thinking about that. I'm just having a little bit of a joke there, Mel, before your lines light up there. I'm not suggesting that at the moment. But certainly there was a resolution last night that we put $30,000 aside to continue to develop one of our previous plans. There have been some previous plans that have been looked at, and some of those have been price tags up to almost $70 million for an aquatic leisure centre, indoor aquatic leisure centre. That's not something that we're considering. We don't have that kind of money, and we don't think there would be government grants out there anywhere near
for that
level.
much. Yeah.
So what we have done is we've said, let's look at some of those previous plans. Money's been spent by council on looking at previous plans, and they haven't really gone any further. So we said, let's allocate $30,000 from our budget for next year to go and look at the plans. There was a 2017 plan that looked like the most reasonable one, to see if we can fine-tune that a little bit, maybe get a bit more definite on pricing, maybe refine the pricing down a little bit. Just let's have a look at that to see if there's something reasonable. We all know that anytime we're after a grant of any description, having a shovel-ready plan with costings that are reasonably accurate, ready to go, gives us a much better chance, because when we do actually put in for a grant, those grant bodies, whether it be state or federal government, typically want to be able to say, go for it once you've got it, rather than start the planning process. So this is really about potentially looking at something to get some plans ready to go so that we can start looking for those grant opportunities.
There was success, speaking of grant opportunities, with the Wiradjuri Cultural Tourism Centre. There was a lot of discussion about council not funding it. There was money, there wasn't. What are we going to do? And it was resolved, obviously, to go and try and get some grant money, and over $7 million being announced for that recently. Great news.
Yeah, 7.190505.
Well done.
The largest federal grant ever for a piece of community infrastructure in Dubbo. That's
wow,
in
there
history.
you go.
Yeah, that's right. The build itself is about a $15 million bill. That'll be our second biggest community project ever, behind the theatre.
Okay.
So it's a significant project, and I think we as a council, and certainly our staff, have done very well. We managed to get $5.6 million from the state government to put towards this. The federal government grant, the one that was $7.2 million I just mentioned, that there was essentially a 50-50 grant, that was the process for that. But we very cleverly used some state government money for the 50-50 part of our contribution. So in the end, we'll build a $15 million facility for $2.2 million. Now, that to me is an equation that's quite acceptable every day of the week. The theatre, we spent $16 million on the theatre, 100% funded by us. Our cultural centre, $8.2 million, 100% funded by us. So to get to the point where we're funding just over 14%, that's pretty impressive, and that's a really exciting project. And we've got a pretty tight timeline on that because of the grant money that we've got. So middle of 2026, I'm saying that somewhere around there we'll have that built, because we've got some pretty tight deadlines, so we have to have it built pretty much by then.
We spoke to Councillor Pam Wells earlier in the week, who obviously was thrilled with this money, but I did sort of ask her about timelines, and she said, look, how long's a piece of string? Because you never can know for sure when these kinds of things are going to happen. But obviously if there's restrictions on that money, then that changes things.
And I must admit, I was a bit excited. I got the text from our local member, Mark Coulton, who sent me the text to say, well done, you've got that. And I actually did I let out a bit of a noise then. So.
A bit of woohoo.
That's right. So it was pretty exciting, because it's been ticking away for a long time. I think the first grant application was put in 2019 to get the first amount of money for that, and then that's progressed from there, and plans have progressed, and it's grown a bit from that first concept. But what it is now, it's pretty exciting. And we went up there the other day. It's at Elizabeth Park, just where our Japanese gardens are, Adventure Playground, that same parcel of land. And we actually marked it on the ground because we had a little bit of media we're doing there, just to show the scale of it. And when you sit back and look at it, the physical scale of it, and we didn't have the height there obviously, but when you start to look at the height, it's kind of about the height of a two-storey building, for example, and then a large circle. You say, yeah, this is going to be something that's a fairly imposing piece of infrastructure, which is great. That's
in the best possible way.
Exactly right.
Yeah. Look, one other thing that was mentioned last night, and there's a special ceremony happening today, John Fardell being recognised for 50 years service to local government in Dubbo.
Yeah, pretty impressive, isn't it?
So impressive.
Yeah. And we've got people that have had great careers in council, and many people that have been there for, we do 10 and 20 and 30 year celebrations for people, but 50 years. And it's interesting, he's actually worked in that time for 4 different organisations, but had the one job. So
True.
It goes way back to Dubbo Municipal Council. Then he worked for Talbragar Shire Council. Council, and then after the amalgamation of Talbot and Dubbo, he worked for Dubbo City Council, and now after the amalgamation with Dubbo Regional, he's worked for Dubbo Regional Council. So he's kind of worked for the one organisation, but 4 versions of that.
A few different names.
But he still rides his bike to work every day, gets there early for work, that old school idea of getting there early just to get ready for the day and then get ready to start work in the day. And he absolutely loves, if anyone is thinking about working for council, go and talk to John, because his passion for what he does and just his love of the job and his love of the people in the job and feeling like you're making a difference in the community. And that's one of the things that's really satisfying, I think, for councillors, but also for staff. You feel like the community relies on the services you're providing and you're actually making a difference in the community. And so John is very passionate about that. So, yeah, it was a nice little opportunity last night. And I did make the joke that it's great to see over 100 people in the audience there to see John receive a certificate.
If there was ever a chance that you would say it's okay to clap now, it would be for that from the crowd. Matthew Dickerson, Mayor of Dubbo Regional Council, thank you.
My pleasure, Mel.
Mayoral Memo with Matthew Dickerson from Dubbo Regional Council.